I built my life from the ground up, brick by brick, investment by investment. So when my husband's wealthy family brazenly demanded I hand over half my income, I thought it was just preposterous. I had no idea it was the first move in a chilling game of betrayal, identity theft, and a shocking double life that would expose the dark truth about the man I married and the family I thought I'd joined. I met Leo Miller 6 years ago in vibrant San Francisco. At the time, I, Amelia Chen, was in my late 20s, completely focused on my data analytics career. I loved this work. It demanded meticulousness, logical analysis, and sharp intuition to spot hidden patterns within a vast sea of data. I worked tirelessly building a solid career in financial independence. My apartment in Soma, my smart investments, and my financial freedom were the fruits of my relentless effort. It wasn't ostentatious, but it was mine, created by my own hard work and intellect. Leo, conversely, always gave me the impression that he came from a wealthy, prestigious family. At least, that's what I believed, and that's what he wanted me to believe. He had the calm demeanor, charming confidence, and refined tastes of someone accustomed to a luxurious life in Manhattan's and Connecticut's most exclusive neighborhoods. He never really talked about money specifically, but he always wore the best designer suits, showed off the newest Apple or Tesla gadgets, and indulged in every luxury. His parents, Arthur and Eleanor Miller, were no different. They carried themselves with that old money posture, with a subtle arrogance, as if they were inherently superior to everyone else. Their sprawling estate in Connecticut, laden with antique furnishings and grand ancestral portraits hanging on the walls, exuded wealth at every turn, solidifying the image of a powerful dynasty. But I wasn't some naive, starry-eyed woman captivated by luxury. I had met many wealthy people before, even worked with them constantly in my industry. Yet something about the Miller family always felt off. Arthur and Eleanor would make casual remarks like, "You're so fortunate to be joining our family," or, "A woman like you must be overjoyed by the stability and financial security we can offer." I should have questioned why they assumed I craved stability so desperately, as if I were frantically searching for financial refuge, incapable of creating my own stability. Leo, too, occasionally set off tiny alarm bells. He'd borrow money from me, $200 for a small investment opportunity he couldn't miss, $500 for an unexpected bill that needed immediate payment, and then conveniently forget to repay it or only repay small dribs and drabs months later. Once, he suggested I co-sign on a luxury apartment he wanted to rent, claiming it was better for tax reasons and his credit score wasn't great because he was too busy with big projects. I shot that idea down immediately, feeling something was fundamentally wrong. He also had a habit of forgetting to pay expensive restaurant bills after romantic dinners, leaving me to pull out my wallet, then apologizing later with flowery words and promises to pay me back double by the weekend. Still, I brushed aside these warning signs. I convinced myself it was no big deal, just minor quirks of a wealthy, spoiled man, unaccustomed to managing detailed finances. I had deceived myself until that fateful night when they initiated their scheme. Julian and I had been married for 2 years when his parents invited us to dinner at their luxurious Connecticut estate. This was not unusual. The Miller family adored extravagant family gatherings, complete with pricey wines from renowned cellars and endless discussions about legacy, family tradition, and power connections. But that night, the atmosphere felt different. From the moment we sat at their meticulously polished mahogany dining table, a strange tension hung in the air. Leo seemed unusually animated, his eyes sparkling as if he held a big secret about to be revealed. His mother, Eleanor, glowed with anticipation, and his father, Arthur, typically impassive, wore a terrifyingly satisfied expression. A tiny unease crept into me, like a faint alarm ringing in my mind, warning me something was about to happen. Midway through the meal, Arthur cleared his throat and presented a stack of thick bound papers before me like a prized offering. The documents were magnificent, printed on the finest paper. "We've been thinking about the future," Eleanor said in a warm, almost motherly tone, but I could sense the pretense in every syllable. "About what's best for our family." I glanced at Leo, who was intently observing my reaction, a strange smile playing on his lips, as if he awaited a specific response from me. "We need to ensure financial stability for all," Arthur added, pushing a golden pen toward me, his gaze imposing. "This contract allows us to pool our resources, forming a unified financial entity, working in harmony and growing together to secure the future of the Miller dynasty." I picked up the first page and scanned it. My gut twisted. They wanted me to transfer literally everything. My life's savings, my stock and fund investments, my real estate assets, the Brooklyn apartment, the house I bought and renovated in suburban Westchester, and my stake in a small commercial project I was developing, and even my personal checking accounts, into a family trust squarely under Arthur and Eleanor's control. A wave of nausea rose in my throat. "It's just a formality, babe," Leo said smoothly, his voice as sweet as sugar, as if this were the most natural thing in the world, a self-evident truth. He winked at me, flashing a confident smile that I once found charming, but now only disgusted me, like a predator luring its prey. "You trust me, don't you?" Something inside me snapped. A small click in my mind, a wall collapsing. I leaned back in my chair, took a deep breath to maintain my composure, feeling my heartbeat pound in my chest. I smiled. The smile wasn't just on my lips. It was in my eyes, my gaze sweeping across each member of the Miller family: Leo, Eleanor, Arthur. "Then, you and your parents will love what's in my safe deposit box." Silence descended over the room, thick and suffocating. Leo's grin faltered, his eyes wide with confusion. Eleanor's knuckles whitened around the crystal wine glass she clutched tightly. Arthur's jaw clenched, a vein throbbing on his temple, betraying suppressed anger. Their collective arrogance began to crumble, replaced by palpable anxiety. They had counted on my shock, or even flattery and honor at being welcomed into their empire, overwhelmed by the prospect of a stable future under their protection. They hadn't expected defiance, or that I had a card up my sleeve, a secret preparation they hadn't foreseen. "What's in the safe deposit box?" Leo asked, his voice strained, filled with suspicion and a hint of fear. "Oh, just some paperwork," I said casually, shrugging, trying to keep my face as placid as possible, as if it were merely old bills. "Certain documents, a little something I prepared before we got married, for protection." "Ms. Olivia Vance, my lawyer, has copies." The stillness in the room grew dense, agonizingly suffocating. And then, as if orchestrated by fate itself, the butler entered, perfectly on time, like a Swiss watch. "Ma'am," he said, his tone formal, "your lawyer is here." I wish I could have recorded their expressions. Leo turned pale, as if he'd seen a ghost, his eyes wide and unblinking. Eleanor wore the look of someone forced to swallow a lemon, her face contorted in discomfort and anger. As for Arthur, he simply stared at me, tightening his grip on the contract, his face darkening with resentment and powerlessness. A moment later, attorney Olivia Vance, my lawyer, walked in. She was a sharp woman, always professionally dressed in a power suit, with intelligent and resolute eyes, exuding an unyielding aura. "Good evening, everyone," she greeted us, placing her snakeskin briefcase on the opulent dining table. "I'm told there's a contract my client, Ms. Amelia Chen, is supposed to sign." Eleanor was the first to regain her composure, though her voice was still filled with anger and disdain. "This is a private family matter, Ms. Vance," she snapped, her eyes flashing. "There's no need for lawyers here. You are interfering in internal family affairs." Olivia ignored her politely but firmly, opening her briefcase and flipping through the contract pages quickly and professionally. Then she let out a small, cold laugh filled with irony. "Well," she said, shaking her head, "this is indeed blatant financial manipulation. very poorly disguised under the guise of family and stability. Leo shuffled uncomfortably, trying to diffuse the situation, his voice slightly trembling. "It's not like that, Ms. Vance," he began. "It's just a small misunderstanding. We merely wanted to—" But Olivia cut him off. "Actually, it is, Mr. Miller," she said firmly, looking directly at Leo, her eyes filled with understanding. "If my client signed this, your family would have total control over her holdings. You could drain her bank accounts, sell the assets she worked hard to build, and she would be utterly powerless to stop it. She would become completely financially dependent on your family's benevolence." Eleanor's face flushed crimson. She angrily pounded the table. "This is about trust, about protecting our family," she argued, her voice saccharine and hypocritical. "We just want to secure our son's future." "Right," Olivia replied flatly, her sharp eyes unwavering. "That would explain why the contract explicitly states that you have full withdrawal rights, power to sell properties, and make every major financial decision while my client cannot access her money without your blessing. She would become a mere financial puppet in your hands." She turned to me, smiling, her eyes filled with admiration and respect. "Amelia, it's fortunate you have a lawyer who reads the fine print and isn't afraid to expose the ugly truth hidden beneath the flowery words." Leo abruptly stood, his chair scraping loudly on the marble floor, creating a jarring sound. "Why are you doing this, Maya?" he demanded, looking straight into my eyes, his voice accusatory and angry. "Why are you doing this? Why are you ruining everything?" "Why am I doing this?" I repeated, my voice calm but laced with disbelief, feeling like I was talking to a stranger I didn't know. "You just tried to rob me of everything, to steal the independence and future I painstakingly built with my own hands. That's my question for you." Eleanor's voice became cloyingly sweet again, full of intercession and attempts to soothe the situation. "Darling, this is just a misunderstanding. She's overreacting. Don't listen to this lawyer." "No," I said coldly, decisively. "It isn't." I rose from my chair, took a deep breath, and slowly exhaled, feeling a huge burden gradually lift from my shoulders. "I'm done here." "I will not sign anything." As I stood to leave, Leo clamped a hand around my wrist, firm enough to convey a clear threat. His smirk had vanished, replaced by an icy stare, full of hostility and warning. "Don't do this, Maya," he hissed under his breath, his voice threatening. "You really don't want to make enemies in this family. You'll regret it." "Enemies?" I repeated, yanking my hand free from his grip, feeling disgusted. I looked straight into his eyes, unwavering, my gaze filled with contempt. "That's exactly what you've made me." "And I will not back down." "You will see the consequences of your choices." Eleanor abruptly shifted tactics. She let out a shaky laugh and placed a hand over her chest, dramatic as a soap opera star enacting a tragedy. "Darling, you're blowing this out of proportion. This is all just a big mix-up. My husband and I just want to protect you." I remained silent, my eyes fixed on her, letting her reveal her true nature. She persisted, her voice growing more urgent. "This world can be so treacherous, darling. Money can slip through your fingers in an instant, and we want to protect you. To protect all of us from external risks." "Safe?" I asked, my voice filled with skepticism, emphasizing each word. "Safe from what exactly? From myself? Or from you and Leo, who are openly trying to rob me?" Olivia crossed her arms, her face stern and resolute. "If that were true, Mrs. Miller," she said, "why did you structure the trust so that my client had no control over her own money? It's almost like a legitimate financial seizure, a sophisticated form of asset appropriation." Arthur sighed audibly, as if he was losing patience with his wife's charade. He glared at Eleanor, then at Leo, his eyes filled with reproach. "This has become unnecessary, Eleanor. Let's act like adults. Don't complicate things further." I almost laughed out loud, a bitter, ironic laugh. "Like adults?" I repeated, my voice mocking and contemptuous. You mean the kind of adults who try to swindle their own family? The kind of adults who orchestrated an elaborate plan to steal their daughter-in-law's assets without blinking, just to salvage their son's career and finances? His face darkened, but I refused to be intimidated. Their desperation was plain as day. They were convinced I'd be too shaken and emotional to think logically, to accept my fate. They had badly underestimated me, and that was their biggest mistake. That's when Eleanor dropped her next bombshell, a desperate last-ditch effort to salvage the situation, heedless of the consequences. I suppose, she began with an exasperated sigh, this means you have no interest in grandfather's inheritance in Rhode Island either, right? My head snapped toward her, a sudden light flashing in my mind, connecting the missing pieces. Inheritance? Leo shot his mother a warning look, filled with desperation, but she pressed on, too far gone to stop. Oh, she said lightly, as if inadvertently letting slip a minor secret. Did Leo neglect to mention his grandfather's estate in Rhode Island? The true family fortune, darling. It's worth hundreds of millions of dollars, and it's awaiting settlement. I felt Olivia's gaze flicker to me. We both realized the same thing. Their scheme wasn't just about my finances. It went much deeper, a more complex plan than I'd imagined. The property is in probate, Eleanor continued, her voice lowering but still filled with calculation and greed, and we'll soon obtain full control. But if you keep being so difficult, then you won't get a single cent. She trailed off, leaving the implication dangling, a thinly veiled threat. She was toying with me, dangling this enormous carrot, a promise of wealth I didn't even possess, hoping I'd jump at the prospect of more riches, making me forget everything that had just happened. But all I saw was a disturbing pattern, a family skilled in taking what never belonged to them, predators in the guise of loved ones, willing to do anything for money. And Leo? He'd known all along but hadn't breathed a word to me, never once warned me. I turned to him, my eyes filled with disappointment and indignation. Were you ever going to say anything about this true family fortune, Leo? Or were you also part of this plan from the beginning? He ran a hand through his hair, his face tense, his eyes avoiding my gaze. I was waiting for the right time, Maya. The right moment when things lined up better for all of us. Better for who, Leo? I pressed, my voice challenging. He said nothing because we both knew the truth. He would never have told me if it hadn't been forced out into the open in an unavoidable confrontation. We left that night without a goodbye. In the car, Olivia massaged her temples, sighing heavily, her face tired yet resolute. You realize what's happening, don't you? Yeah, I murmured, my eyes fixed on the city lights flashing by, continuously connecting the dots. They're not just after my money. They're desperate. They're bankrupt, aren't they? Exactly. She tapped her fingers against the side of her briefcase. If the Rhode Island estate is as large as they claim, they'll do whatever it takes to gain control. And their attempt to force you to merge your assets into their trust indicates they're in much more serious financial trouble than you imagine. They're on the verge of collapse. I stared out the window, the wheels of my mind turning rapidly, data and information constantly being processed. What do you think the odds are that Leo is heavily in debt, Olivia? Olivia shot me a pointed glance. You believe he's hiding something? I'm sure of it, I said. In retrospect, it all makes sense. The flashy lifestyle, the designer clothes, the way he bragged about money but rarely paid the bills himself. He always lived beyond his means. If he truly was drowning in debt, then the trust scheme wasn't just about controlling me. It was his Hail Mary, a desperate attempt to save himself from the mire. The next morning, I did what I should have done ages ago. I hired a top private investigator in New York. I wanted details on everything, his credit history, his debts, his past dealings, all his secret relationships, everything. And what came back was even worse than I'd imagined, far exceeding my suspicions. Leo was in massive debt. Maxed out credit cards, predatory personal loans from shady institutions, and even a business loan worth hundreds of thousands of dollars that he had secretly taken out in my name without my consent. Rage erupted within me like a fierce fire, burning away any lingering affection I had for him. I confronted him that very evening at our apartment where I had paid for most of the rent. "How long have you been stealing from me, Leo? How many debts have you piled up under my name?" Leo blinked, his face a picture of feigned innocence, trying to pretend he didn't understand. "What are you talking about, Maya? I don't know what you mean." I hurled the evidence at him. Bank statements showing his extravagant spending, loan contracts with my forged signature, reports from the private investigator. "You took out a huge loan using my name. You've been swimming in debt, lying to me repeatedly, manipulating me, and you expected me to sign over everything I own so you could fix your own problems? Did you think I was that stupid Leo Miller?" This time, he didn't even bother refuting it. Instead, he did something more appalling, something that sent shivers down my spine. He laughed. A bitter, hollow laugh, devoid of any remorse or regret, only smugness and contempt. "You were always so careful, Maya," he sneered, his tone full of derision. "I thought eventually you'd understand the bigger picture, that we needed to be practical about our future. That sometimes you need to sacrifice a little to achieve a bigger goal. But you just don't get it, do you?" My heart pounded in my chest, not from fear, but from a cold, controlled fury. "So you planned this all along? To turn me into your cash cow, your unlimited credit card, your retirement fund for you and your mother?" He looked at me, his face inscrutable, his eyes filled with defiance. "You have no idea what you've started, Maya. You'll regret this. You'll never escape this family." I took a step back, adrenaline coursing through my veins. "Are you threatening me, Leo Miller?" He didn't reply. He just gave me one cold, hateful glare, grabbed his coat, and slammed the door shut on his way out, leaving me alone in the apartment. I stood there, fists clenched, more furious than afraid. If he believed it was over, he couldn't have been more wrong. The fight had only just begun. After he left, I barely slept. My brain continuously processed the information, the puzzle pieces in my head clicking into place cruelly and clearly. Every suspicious act of his, every lie, every subtle maneuver was designed to pave the way for their grand scheme. By morning, my phone buzzed, and I answered to find Olivia on the other end, her voice tight with tension but also a hint of excitement. "Maya, you need to come to my office immediately. I have some shocking news." I didn't waste time asking why. When I arrived, she was waiting with a thick file on her desk. "You're not going to like this," she warned, pushing it my way. I flipped it open and my stomach dropped, feeling like someone had just punched me hard. There was another woman. Actually, two, Chloe and Emma. "Leo was lying about a lot more than money, Maya," Olivia said quietly, her voice full of sympathy and a touch of disbelief. She turned to two photos of these women, both breathtaking, both younger than me, their eyes filled with trust and hope. "Chloe was with him 2 years ago," Olivia explained. "He promised her an engagement, took out a loan in her name, emptied her savings, then vanished without a trace. He said he would use the money to invest in their shared future." I felt nauseous, a wave of disgust rising within me. "And Emma?" Olivia shook her head sadly. "Emma was last year's target. Same modus operandi, but he never ended things properly with her. He's still involved with her. In fact, he's engaged and set to marry her in 6 weeks." It took me a few seconds to absorb that information, my mind reeling in horror. "He's engaged? To Emma? Getting married in 6 weeks?" My voice sounded distant to my own ears, like an echo from afar. Olivia nodded. "He proposed to Emma. He told her they'd be married in 6 weeks. My mouth went dry, feeling utterly drained. So he was a married man. My husband betrothed to someone else, all while blatantly conning all 3 of us without blinking an eye. Then I realized something else. A final piece of the puzzle fitting into the horrifying picture. The enormous inheritance in Rhode Island that his parents were so fixated on, Leo needed to be married to a stable and legitimate woman to unlock it. That explained his desperation to keep me legally bound through that contract, and also why he was frantically lining up my replacement when I started getting suspicious. This wasn't just about siphoning off my money. It was part of a larger, twisted, dark plan, orchestrated long ago, turning me and these other women into mere pawns in their game. I knew I had to speak to Emma. She was the final key. Olivia arranged a discreet meeting at a quiet cafe in Brooklyn the following afternoon. The moment Emma arrived, I felt a pang of sympathy deep inside. She radiated happiness, naive and excited about her upcoming marriage, completely unaware that she was engaged to a cunning fraudster, a monster in human disguise. I introduced myself, and as soon as I said Leo's name, her eyes flashed with suspicion, mixed with caution. "How do you know him? Who are you?" she asked wearily, her voice guarded. "Because," I said, laying my wedding band on the coffee table, the metal clinking against the surface, "he's my husband." "I am his wife." Emma's reaction was visceral. Shock spread across her features, her eyes wide, her mouth agape in horror. "That's impossible," she whispered, her voice barely a breath, struggling to keep calm, but her entire body was trembling. "I'm afraid it's not," I replied, my voice filled with regret. I watched her trembling fingers reach into her bag, withdrawing her engagement ring to place it next to mine. 2 identical diamond rings, glittering side by side on the table, proof of a cruel deception, a sophisticated crime. She began to sob uncontrollably, tears spilling down her face as she recounted her story. Leo had told her about a forthcoming colossal inheritance from his grandfather, but insisted he had to be married to receive it. He promised they'd move to Europe, live a lavish life, free from financial worries, and begin a glamorous new chapter. He'd already convinced her to hand over her life savings to him to invest in a secret project. My hands balled into fists, rage boiling inside me. "Are you still in contact with him?" I asked, wiping her cheeks. She nodded. "Yes. This weekend, he's taking me to meet his parents to discuss the wedding plans." I exhaled, a cold, determined smile appearing on my lips. "Perfect. Let's disrupt that little gathering together. Let's make it a memorable show." Emma agreed to play along. She continued texting Leo, feigning ignorance, staying enthusiastic about their so-called future, keeping him within our reach. Meanwhile, I dug deeper. The forensic accountant I hired uncovered an offshore account linked to Leo, a secret stash for funneling illicit funds he had defrauded from various victims. The debt I'd discovered was just the tip of the iceberg compared to his complex financial network. I also investigated his parents, Arthur and Eleanor. That Rhode Island estate, they didn't have clear legal rights to it. The probate process was complicated, tangled, and stalled due to the Miller family's enormous debts. They needed a stable heir with a valid marriage to gain full control of that massive estate. Leo was that pawn, and I was the key. But now I had enough ammunition to dismantle their entire operation, to bring everything to light. The evening of the grand family dinner arrived swiftly. Leo was under the impression he'd be introducing his darling, unsuspecting fiancée to his gracious, doting parents, preparing for a perfect marriage and a massive inheritance. Instead, he was in for the shock of his life, an unimaginable downfall. Emma and I arrived together. I walked in first, finding Arthur and Eleanor already seated at the lavish dining table, sipping red wine as if presiding over a royal banquet. Eleanor's expression soured instantly when she saw me. "What are you doing here, Maya?" she snarled, her eyes flashing with anger. "You are not welcome here." I smiled serenely, maintaining my composure. "Do you really think I'd miss an important family affair like this? Especially when I'm an indispensable part of this story." Just then, Leo entered, his hand on Emma's arm. He froze mid-step, the color draining from his face as he recognized me, and then Emma standing beside me, her eyes cold and accusatory. I watched panic, swift and horrifying, flicker in his eyes. "Babe," he said to Emma, his voice trembling, trying desperately to keep calm. Why is she here?" Emma crossed her arms over her chest, her gaze filled with indignation. "You tell me, Leo." A heavy pause. Eleanor stood abruptly, her chair scraping loudly as it fell back. "This is absurd! I will not have this spectacle at my dining table! Get out, Maya!" I chuckled, my laugh echoing in the tense room, full of sarcasm. "Oh, I think you should pay very close attention, because this is a show you won't want to miss. It's going down in family history." I glanced toward Olivia, who stood calmly waiting by the doorway, holding a thick file. "Would you like to begin, Olivia?" Olivia stepped forward, opening the thick file. "Let's start with the fraud," she declared, her voice clear and resonant in the tense silence. "Then we'll get to the matter of bigamy." The room erupted in gasps of shock. Eleanor let out a horrified gasp as if she'd just been slapped hard. Arthur slammed his glass onto the table so violently that red wine splashed everywhere, staining the pristine white tablecloth. Emma, with all her anger and betrayal, hurled her engagement ring at Leo, and it landed on the floor with a dry clink. And Leo just stared at me, his eyes brimming with hatred. He understood that his careful facade was shattered, the scam exposed. Yet an even heavier silence descended, one charged with impending disaster. Leo stood frozen, gripping the table edge until his knuckles whitened, trying to cling to any last semblance of power. His mother's face contorted in rage and shock, her lips moving as though she yearned to scream curses, but no sound escaped. His father stared blankly, the ramifications of their schemes settling on his shoulders like a colossal boulder. "Fraud?" Eleanor spat, finally regaining her voice, though it trembled. "Where did you find these absurd accusations? These are fabrications. You're slandering our family." Olivia calmly laid a thick file on the table. "The evidence is all here, Mrs. Miller. Bank statements, loan forms, forged signatures on loan agreements, and yes, proof that Leo secured a business loan using his wife's name without her consent." "That alone is a felony, a clear criminal charge." Leo jolted as though struck, his whole body trembling, his eyes wide with fear. But Eleanor pounded the table again, her voice full of contempt. "This is a private family matter. We will handle it internally. You have no right to interfere." "No," I said firmly, my voice resolute. "It stopped being family business the second you and Leo tried to rob me. Now it's a legal matter. And I won't stop until justice is served." Emma interjected, her voice trembling with anger and betrayal, tears still welling in her eyes. "And what about the bigamy, Leo? Because last I checked, I was engaged to a single man, not someone's lying married con artist." Leo slowly got to his feet, his chair scraping loudly on the wooden floor. "Emma," he began in a low, desperate, persuasive tone, "I can explain." "It's not what you think." I love you." She laughed bitterly, filled with contempt. "Please do tell. I'm dying to hear what lie you'll concoct next." He gulped, his throat seemingly constricted, his eyes darting around as if searching for a non-existent emergency exit. "Yes, I was involved with you while still technically married," he finally admitted, his voice weak. "But it wasn't what you think. My marriage to her was done a long time ago." He gestured in my direction without actually looking at me, as if I were some obnoxious object, a mere obstacle. "We were just drawing out the final details." I let out a derisive snort, a small, scoffing sound. "You were so done with me that you tried to maneuver me into signing away my entire net worth? You even planned to turn me into a retirement fund for you and your mother? Sounds pretty active to me, Leo Miller." Emma turned to face him, her eyes narrowed to slits, filled with anger and betrayal. "Everything you said, was it all a lie? From beginning to end? Every promise?" She paused, her voice trembling, filled with anguish. All the plans, the dreams, the wedding, everything you promised, was it all a meticulously staged play to deceive me? For a split second, an unidentifiable emotion flickered across Leo's face. Perhaps regret, perhaps panic, perhaps the dawning realization of his catastrophic failure. "I meant it," he said, his voice so faint it was almost inaudible. "I wanted that future with you, Emma." "A real future? While you were still married?" she shot back, her voice thick with scorn and disgust. He had no comeback, utterly defeated. Eleanor, seething with rage, swung her glare to me, her eyes blazing as if I were the sole cause of all their woes. "You orchestrated this entire ambush! You're trying to ruin us! Ruin the Miller family! This is a wicked conspiracy!" I actually burst out laughing, a cold, sarcastic laugh, utterly fearless. "Ruin you?" I repeated. "You did that to yourselves, Mrs. Miller." I merely gathered the evidence and brought the truth to light. "I am merely the one exposing the truth you tried so hard to bury." Leo had been too quiet for too long, but now he couldn't contain himself. Suddenly he exploded, losing all control. "You think you've won?" His words sliced through the air, low and threatening. Everyone in the room swiveled to face him, stunned by his outburst. He directed his fury at me, his eyes bloodshot, filled with resentment. "You act innocent, but you've loved having the upper hand all along. You relished holding the purse strings, making me come begging for money. You looked down on me, you controlled my life." I raised my eyebrows, my face feigning surprise. "Funny way of describing me safeguarding my finances from a chronic liar and a parasite, Leo." "I didn't control you. I protected myself." His face tightened, filled with hatred. "You never trusted me. You never supported me." "You never gave me any reason to trust or support you," I countered, my voice firm. He slammed his fist onto the table, rattling the silverware and crystal glasses. "I was your husband. You were supposed to stand by me, not betray me like this." Emma backed away a step, trembling from his outburst, her eyes wide with horror. Eleanor looked up. After Julian's arrest that night, charged with fraud, identity theft, and bigamy, more than enough to put him behind bars, his parents and their coveted estate were finally seized within a few months. Sophia and I met for drinks the next day, clinking our glasses in a quiet toast to our victory. Some say revenge is meaningless, that it solves nothing. But for us, bringing all of them into the light was absolutely worth it. Because sometimes when others try to crush you, the most satisfying triumph is ensuring their downfall is even greater. A month later, I stood bathed in the gentle morning light of my second store. It was open, thriving, and secure. Vance Designs had not only survived but flourished, not because I was lucky, but because I was prepared. Because I trusted my intuition. And because I refused to let betrayal define me. The bank recovered 97% of the stolen funds, and the rest was covered by fraud insurance. But the money was never the biggest victory. It was Sarah. She moved in with me, filed for divorce, and re-enrolled in school. The dark circles under her eyes had begun to fade. She laughed again. She baked again. She was healing. She told me something last night as we chopped vegetables, just like we used to with Mom. "You were so brave to protect what you built, Chloe." I want to be brave enough to rebuild myself, and she is doing just that. Mark Julian pleaded guilty. He'll be in prison for a long time, but his power ended the day Sarah stood up and said, "I'm done being afraid." Last weekend, we returned to the lake house. Not for a reunion, but for a new beginning. The whole family pitched in to paint, repair, and reclaim the space that almost shattered us. And we established new rules. Real family protects, it doesn't manipulate. Have you ever had to cut a toxic family member out of your life to protect what you love? Do you see a part of yourself in this story of resilience? Let me know in the comments below if you've ever had to say enough is enough. And if you're still gathering your courage, borrow a little from me, because blood does not give anyone the right to break you. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications for the Unscripted Drama channel so you don't miss even more powerful stories of independence, inner strength, and unexpected justice.